Today, Star Wars is something of a peculiarity. A once timeless and enduring saga is now, in the main, closer to run of the mill streaming fodder. Sure, people tune in, but it's now less of an event for most, and this lukewarm happenstance interest is clear in the box office takings of the sequel movies and the reported viewing figures of some of the Disney Plus series. And while the Disney Plus content has served us some great moments that have meant a lot to me personally, the audience ratings and box office of the sequels has undoubtedly led to a decline in interest and appetite for more Star Wars in the future. In my inaugural Datatainer Deconstruction video, I used data and observation to try and understand why the sequels triggered this decline, and I identified that a mix of humour directed at the antagonists, a lack of world building, a lack of classical hero arc for the character of Rey, and the resulting lack of internal conflict for her as the hero between the light and the dark side of the Force were the reasons for the lower audience enjoyment and sharper declines in box office takings than the prequel trilogy. Please check out that video if you want to see the data and trends, though stay with me for now, because the big question now facing Disney and Lucasfilm is how can they recover from this decline and make Star Wars once again a must-see event for mass audiences and its passionate fandom alike? Well, the answer actually lies in the fandom. Much is written about the Star Wars fandom that the only thing they have in common is they all hate Star Wars, and they simply need to accept Star Wars has moved on and evolved to other different experiences than the ones they had in their rose-tinted childhood. Now I accept there's a grain of truth in this, that perhaps whatever Lucasfilm do, there'll always be a group of haters out there. But this really does miss the bigger picture, and if we look closely enough, we can see in the fandom what can save Star Wars, with the answer focusing less on what they hate and more on what they create. There are hundreds of Star Wars fan fiction short films uploaded on YouTube, free for audiences to watch and comment on. Some are made by fledgling filmmakers looking to show their skills and further their careers, others by fans crowdfunding, finance and independently creating stories. But all are genuine attempts to contribute to the Star Wars universe and expand it with more stories to serve its fandom. And if we look closely enough at these short films, we can start to find the answers we need to bring Star Wars' popularity back to its previous heights. In this video, I will provide an analysis of Star Wars fanfiction films. I will focus on fan films uploaded to YouTube that have attracted at least 500,000 views. All films in the analysis will have a narrative and are not re-edits of existing canon footage or lightsaber competition duels. Across these films, I will look at how the views for them relate to their story focus, to point the way forward for the types of stories Lucasfilm can consider to reinvigorate interest in the franchise. This represents 88 short films with over 2,000 minutes of runtime and 308 million views. And by story focus, I mean the point of view of the lead characters. Do they serve the Rebellion or the Empire? Are they Force users, and if so, are they Jedi or Sith? Or are the lead characters and points of view more ambiguous, such as the Mandalorians, or criminals or scavengers just trying to get by while the Empire and Rebellion wage war against each other? To do this, we can look at these fan fiction films as a galaxy, with sectors representing lead character points of view and story focus. And the planets in each sector are shown in a colour that represents the story focus, with the size of each planet signifying the view count, and with larger planets therefore having higher views than smaller ones. So, what do we learn when we look at this data visualization about what Star Wars fans want to see? The first and most striking observation is that there is more balance between the light and the dark side of the Force than we might initially expect. Typically, Star Wars movies and episodic content focus their story on the Jedi and the Rebellion. We look through the eyes of the light side protagonists in the story, while Empire and Sith antagonists feature and act as challenges for the Rebels and Jedi to overcome. The Skywalker saga is always told through the eyes of its protagonist, showing their battle with the Empire and the Sith, and their own internal conflict between the light and the dark side of the Force. And this is quite typical for Hollywood movies and shows, with the protagonists often acting as the central lens of the storytelling. Yet, in fan fiction films, the Empire and the Sith more frequently appear as the story focus, with these stories told from their point of view. In fact, fan films that take the Empire and Sith points of view outnumber those of the Rebellion and the Jedi, with 42 films versus 34. And we see the top 5 Sith and Empire films attracting a much higher view count than the top 5 of the Rebellion and the Jedi. Why might this be the case, and what can we learn from this to point to stories that might become more popular for Star Wars in the future? Let's now travel around the fanfiction galaxy to find these answers, starting with the Sith sector. The largest fan film planets in the Sith sector with the highest views have a clear link with canon characters. The film with the highest view count of all fanfiction films at the time of publishing this video is Star Wars S338 Reimagined, and as its title would suggest, it reimagines a key moment in canon, when Darth Vader confronts Obi-Wan in their final duel on the Death Star. The experience is high octane, with the filmmakers taking the more fast-paced, acrobatic lightsaber choreography of the prequels and applying them to this iconic duel from the originals. It's fun and a true reimagining, but it's in the moments of dialogue signalling Vader's inner rage that we see signals of stories Lucasfilm can explore, with my personal favourite being when he tells Obi-Wan in a claustrophobic-inducing tunnel that there is no escape, with this bringing with it echoes of their duel on Mustafar. And when the echoes of Vader's past haunt his mind before striking Obi-Wan down, with sounds of Anakin screaming his hatred on Mustafar and Obi-Wan telling him he loved him. It's not only poignant, but it helps to connect the mindset of Vader in A New Hope to his downfall in Revenge of the Sith. And in fairness to Lucasfilm, they have covered this territory in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Moments where we see Vader staring into the abyss of hyperspace as he recalls their sparring, and in a scene that personally meant a lot to me, when we see the duality of Anakin and Vader behind the mask, only to then realise Anakin is really gone in that final and spiteful smile. The second highest viewed video featuring Vader is produced by none other than YouTuber Star Wars Theory, titled Vader Episode 1 Shards of the Past. In this film, we also see an insight into Vader's mind and internal conflict, with his memories and regrets about Padmé's death and his anger and desire to kill Palpatine. I also thought this scene in the Bacta tank was an incredible moment, and one that preceded and possibly inspired what we saw in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. The series director Deborah Chow and Lucasfilm got a fair amount of criticism for the Obi-Wan show, but in these moments I think they really delivered for the audience, and we can certainly see in fanfiction film views there remains a lot of appetite to see more of Vader, given that he appears in 19 films in total. Moving from Vader, the second highest viewed fan film takes the perspective of Darth Maul and shows his final test from Palpatine before he is anointed as a Sith Lord. On the face of it, this film is an excellently choreographed lightsaber duel between Maul and a group of Jedi tricked by Palpatine to visit the planet he's training on. The variety of lightsaber moves and flips is near to the quality we saw in the choreography in the prequels. Yet it's in the pauses in conflict we get an insight into Maul's mind and motivations. Like when after he kills the first Jedi and turns to face the others, we see a slight smile that shows that he relishes the fight and challenge to come. And when he has a moment of doubt before killing the last Jedi, but quickly recovers his rage and anger to deal her the final blow. When watching the preceding sequence of the young Padawan taking the fight to Maul, I did fear we would be in Rey territory, where a character with limited training and experience topples a more experienced and battle-hardened foe, but the filmmakers followed through with their representation of Maul in dealing the final blow, and I do think the film is the better for it. acting as a prequel of sorts for a generally well-liked character in the prequel's movies that, in my view, had a scandalously short amount of screen time. Other Sith characters also appear in this sector, where we get entertaining and insightful stories for audiences that haven't yet read the Legends books. Some highlights for me are Malak, an Old Republic story. This film tells the story of what is behind his mask for those familiar with him from the Knights of the Old Republic video games, again suggesting new angles that could be told in this era if Disney and Lucasfilm break free from the Skywalker era. Another is Nihilus, Fall of Qatar. It's a near psychedelic introduction for most audiences to Nihilus, and seeing him on film promises a mysterious and powerful Sith adversary that audiences will likely want to see more of. With this interest expressed in these characters, we also see a signal of a desire to break from the Skywalker saga to previous eras in Star Wars lore. And again, Lucasfilm has recognised this potential to re-engage audiences with the announcement of the James Mangold directed movie set in the time of the Old Republic. The upcoming Disney Plus series The Acolyte, while so far not receiving an enthusiastic response from audiences with its launch trailer, signals a further recognition from Lucasfilm that they are near to running out of road in the Skywalker timeline. Moving from the Sith to the Empire, the highest viewed fan film in this sector is TIE Fighter, and it's easy to see why. The animation is first class, but again, the point of view and the story is as good a reason as to why audiences were drawn to it. In the main, it takes a matter-of-fact point of view of the TIE Fighter pilots in their attempt to shoot down their X-Wing enemies. There is genuine camaraderie between them, and I think this gives us a new view into the people that served in the Empire. They're not portrayed as quote-unquote evil characters, just people who are working for one side of the fight. Lucasfilm has explored this territory before in the Andor series, and while we saw a point of view of Empire characters like Cyril Khan, they were mostly bland and one-dimensional, simply full of ambition and somewhat bereft of personality and wit. And the perspective in The Last Jedi about there being no good or evil sides on Canto Bight was a bit more of a preachy message than an entertaining drama. Another notable example in the Empire sector is Heir to the Empire, an animated film, where we have a depiction of Thrawn more like the one I would have imagined from Timothy Zahn's books. A dastardly, quick-witted and likeable villain, always one step ahead of his adversaries, and a more accurate representation than the more bland, vacant Thrawn we got in the Ahsoka series. Other Empire stories in the galaxy take a point of view of the Stormtroopers. In some fan films, we see a possible inspiration from the sequels here, with Finn's internal conflict in being a conscripted trooper and move to the rebellion as a likely basis for the film TK-436, A Stormtrooper Story. Here we see a similar dynamic, and when you watch this fan film, one has to think what Disney could have done with the character of Finn had they not relegated him to a source of slapstick comedy and a mere foil for Rey. Other fan films that focus on the Stormtroopers tend to take a more comedic tone. Such an example is Troops, uploaded to YouTube in 2013. The recording style is rough and of its time, but it adds to its end charm, acting as a parody of fly-on-the-wall reality cop shows. And while we wouldn't expect Disney to take a comedic direction with the Empire, it's another example of the humanity that could have been represented in the characters on this side of the fight. Some, like Finn, were conscripts that didn't choose their side, and perhaps they could make more of this in the future. Moving to the light side of the fanfiction galaxy and the Jedi, we also see new perspectives linked to well-known and liked characters, as well as non-canon characters that could point to new directions. The highest viewed fan film with a Jedi story focus features Mace Windu, and is another entry into the fanfiction galaxy from Star Wars Theory. This entry from Theory is an animation titled Vader Episode 2 Mace Windu Returns. While titled about Vader and featuring him, we can consider this film at least an equal representation of the Jedi, as it features Mace's return with his brutal slaying of a group of stormtroopers. And it's in his look towards Vader that we see unfinished business, with the last time they saw each other when Anakin cut off his arm and allowed Palpatine to push him out of the window with Force lightning. If I'm honest, I always assumed Mace died in this encounter, but the suggestion that he survived is in of itself intriguing, and the possibility of theory, or maybe in the future Disney, bringing back this loved and brooding dark character would surely be welcomed by the fandom and mass audiences alike. Closely following in view count is Kenobi, a Star Wars film. It covers similar territory to the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, including some interactions with a young Luke Skywalker. It's a serviceable addition in the galaxy and has clearly found an audience, but with the Kenobi series on Disney Plus, it no longer really offers a new direction Disney and Lucasfilm could take to attract bigger audiences for the franchise. Which brings us to some of the other Jedi entries to the fanfiction galaxy that point to popular story territories they could explore. The first is Revan, a Star Wars short film. Set in the Old Republic era, Darth Revan is typically portrayed as a Sith in his mask and dark cloak. Yet this film has most of his screen time as a Jedi back on Coruscant. While a little long for my liking for a fan film, it depicts the ambiguity around Revan and distrust of him from other characters, having turned to the dark side as a Sith, and then coming back as a reformed Jedi. And that makes me think this is a story begging to be told with the budgets Disney can invest in it. In a similar story territory, we have Dark Jedi, a Star Wars fan film, where here we see one Jedi trying to convince another to turn away from the dark side and reform his ways, with tragic consequences. And it's with these films as examples we can see a possible territory for Disney and Lucasfilm to explore, one where Jedis could turn to Siths and Siths could come back to the light and become Jedis. And while we've seen this type of arc before with Vader, these stories do suggest an appetite from audiences to further explore this internal conflict and tug between the light and the dark, something I called for in my first video as a lacking element in the sequel movies that was only really given a few token moments and too late in the day to recover Rey's character arc. In fact, while we see some fine Jedi additions in the galaxy that take a more traditional light side story, there are even more examples of a focus of this internal conflict for Jedis being seduced by the dark side of the Force, such as the Grey Jedi and Dark Legacy. Which brings us back to the upcoming Disney Plus series, The Acolyte. Like I said earlier, the fan reaction to the teaser trailer is not encouraging, and I can see why. There's really not much to go on, and what we do see doesn't fill me with hope that we'll get an entertaining return to form, with rather wooden action choreography and a mechanical checkmark that lightsaber duels will be included. I also don't buy into the message in the trailer that good and evil does not matter, only power does. It signals a story that the light and the dark side no longer matter, which takes us away again from the essence of what made Star Wars such an enduring story. There is always a choice between the dark and the light. And like Yoda said to Luke about the dark side, one that is quicker, easier, more seductive, but can consume your destiny. But we can keep hope that perhaps the teaser trailer was a misstep and the actual story of the Acolyte addresses this territory, as the evidence in the fanfiction film views suggests that these stories with a viewpoint of the Sith or a Jedi struggling with an internal conflict between the light and the dark are popular with audiences. Which brings us to our final sector in the galaxy where the future of Star Wars could be taken, the viewpoint of the Rebellion. This sector attracts lower views and a lower number of entries to the fanfiction galaxy than the Empire, suggesting generally less appetite from audiences to continue to engage with stories that focus on the rebellion. But within these entries, we do see a theme yet to be fully explored by Disney, which is the view of X-Wing pilots in films such as Rebel Scum and The Lost Patrol. Like TIE fighters, we focus on characters piloting the spacecrafts, the dogfights with their enemies, the tension and their camaraderie. And here we see something touched on in the originals that it appears there is an appetite from audiences to see more of. And again, Disney and Lucasfilm may possibly yet deliver such experiences with the on, off, and on again production of Rogue Squadron possibly coming to a theatre near you at some point. That's if it's not off again. And it's across these sectors of the fan fiction galaxy we see an opportunity for Disney and Lucasfilm to get this cherished part of popular culture back where it belongs. Whether it's in the expanding of the Skywalker timeline with more backstories from some of its darker characters, such as with a Vader or Mace Windu series, or a new era with Sith Force users like Malak, Nihilus, or the light and dark duality of Revan, or expanding the viewpoint of Rebel or Empire fighters as they battle each other in space for their cause. Already in their announcement for the expansion of the Star Wars universe, we see Disney exploring some of these directions. Yes, there are some questionable directions with the production of the Rey movie, with little in the data to suggest this will achieve a successful outcome. But there is also recognition to explore new eras with James Mangold's movie, the resurgence of Rogue Squadron, or exploring what appears to be Force users that explore the light and dark side of the Force in The Acolyte, despite the mixed reactions to the teaser trailer. But while we see hope in these directions, there is a difference between strategy and execution. The films in the fan fiction galaxy are of a mixed quality. Some are professional, polished and sharp. Others are more on the amateur side, some deliberately and, well, others likely not. But they all share one thing: a love for Star Wars, not hate. They come from a place of unity, not division. Of passion for the Force and the Star Wars universe, not a desire to commoditize it. Yes, Disney and Lucasfilm have made some missteps of the sequel trilogy and some of their series content, and yes, there's a lot of hate out there at the moment. But I, for one, hope that if we look to the fans and what they make, rather than what they hate, we will get a Star Wars we can enjoy again. To enjoy movies from filmmakers that have a love for the stories, for the Force, and for the fandom. They won't please everyone, but if they show the love and heart of these fanfiction filmmakers, the future of Star Wars will be that much brighter. I thank you for watching this second Datatainer deconstruction. If you like what you saw, please drop a like for the video, and please let me know what you think in the comments. There are so many fanfiction films in the galaxy that I simply didn't have time to cover them all. I've added a link to each entry in the fanfiction galaxy in the description, so please do check them out. What are your favourites, and what can we learn from them? Thanks again for watching, and remember, in the way of data and observation, we can save entertainment.